For the third consecutive night, Nova couldn't sleep. The young bobcat lay, trembling in the corner of the enclosure, amber eyes wide open, staring into the thick darkness surrounding her. The sanctuary staff had tried everything imaginable: heating pads, soft music, plush toys, even mild sedatives, but nothing could soothe the fear and pain visible in the eyes of this wounded wild creature. Only when Thor, a husky with ice-blue eyes, was brought in and placed just outside the enclosure bars at a staff member's random suggestion did Nova slowly close her eyes. Her tense body gradually relaxed, and she fell into a deep sleep for the first time since being rescued. The harsh Montana winter that year not only presented survival challenges for wildlife, but also set the stage for a friendship that transcended natural boundaries. Snow covered the hills more than a meter deep. Temperatures frequently dropped below to 20 degrees, testing the survival abilities of even species adapted to mountain winters. The story of Nova and Thor began 3 weeks earlier when Forest Ranger Mike Peterson, during a routine patrol, discovered a trail of fresh blood staining the pristine white snow. Mike had over 20 years of forest experience. He knew that such fresh blood trails signaled a seriously injured animal, potentially easy prey for predators. Yet, instinct told him to follow the trail. Mike carefully tracked the blood, which grew more abundant as he pushed through dense pine trees and knee-deep snow drifts. The trail led to the base of an old pine tree, its trunk covered with moss. There, curled up in the freezing snow, was a young bobcat with hind legs twisted at an unnatural angle, perhaps only 6 months old, much younger than the age when bobcat kittens typically leave their mothers. Clear signs showed she had freed herself from some mechanical trap, likely poachers. Steel jaws, but at the cost of severe spinal trauma. Too young, Mike thought to himself, gently placing the young bobcat in a warm-lined box in his vehicle. On the way to the sanctuary, he constantly checked on her. The small creature only emitted weak growls, not threatening, but painful. Her amber eyes looked at Mike with confusion and deep pain he had never seen in any other animal. Wildlife veterinarian Lisa Henderson wasted no time when Mike brought the bobcat in. The sanctuary facilities weren't equipped to handle such serious trauma cases, but this was an emergency. Staff prepared a temporary operating room. Lisa quickly performed initial tests. The bobcat had lost significant blood, dangerously low body temperature, and showed signs of internal damage. 4 hours of surgery later, Nova, the name Lisa gave the bobcat based on the bright star she saw in the night sky when Mike brought her in, was still alive. But the diagnosis was harsh, permanent nerve damage to the spine and hind legs. Bobcat who cannot hunt has no future in the wild. During those first days, Nova lay motionless in the special enclosure, prepared for wild cats, refusing all food. Her eyes sometimes stared vacantly into space, sometimes closed from exhaustion, but never truly entering deep sleep. Monitoring through cameras, Lisa saw the young bobcat frequently trying to stand during the night, only to fall in evident pain. Nova's pitiful cries echoed throughout the center, forcing night staff to cover their ears. The medical team began discussing humane euthanasia options. Lisa knew that saving a bobcat who could never return to the wild meant prolonging life in captivity, not always the most humane choice. But before the final decision was made, Sarah Collins, a wildlife photographer working on a project about Montana wolves, visited the sanctuary with Thor, a white-gray husky with eyes like blue ice. No one expected the chance meeting between Thor and Nova would change everything. As Sarah led Thor past the special care area, the dog suddenly stopped, ears perked up, nose pointing toward Nova's enclosure. Unlike other dogs who might bark at the scent of wild cats, Thor just stood still as if drawn by something uniquely special. Sarah allowed Thor to move closer, standing about a meter from Nova's enclosure bars. That's when the young Bobcat unexpectedly raised her head, showing real alertness for the first time. There was no threatening growl, typical when a bobcat encounters a dog. Instead, Nova looked at Thor with rare curiosity, an attentive and focused gaze Lisa hadn't seen since Nova arrived. Thor slowly took a few more steps, gentle and non-threatening. The dog placed his front paws on the enclosure bars, and Nova, with her first effort since surgery, dragged herself forward, using her front legs. The distance between the two creatures narrowed until only the iron bars of the enclosure separated them. Lisa saw something in Nova's eyes she had never seen before. Spark of life. Not the constant fear or pain, but genuine interest. A small door had opened in the closed-off soul of the young bobcat. Sarah began coming to the sanctuary every day with Thor. Initially, they just sat near Nova's enclosure, not forcing interaction or creating pressure. Lisa suggested this experiment continue for 2 weeks to see if Thor's presence would have a lasting positive impact on Nova or if it was just a momentary reaction. Gradually, Nova spent less time curled up in the far corner and more time near the enclosure bars where she could observe Thor. The bobcat began accepting food when Thor was present, something that previously required tremendous effort from staff for minimal results. Nova's basic health indicators also began to stabilize. Heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature gradually returned to normal levels. The breakthrough came on the 5th night of the experiment, when Sarah prepared to take Thor back to her temporary cabin after a long day of observation. Nova began to emit pitiful cries unlike anything heard before. Not the usual painful growls, but a kind of high-pitched wail, almost like a pleading whimper. The painful sound echoed throughout the sanctuary, making even the most experienced staff shudder. Sarah and Thor had gone about 300 m when her phone rang. The night staff reported that Nova was in an extreme state of agitation, refusing to calm down despite all gentle sedative measures. Thor seemed to sense something wrong, too. The dog continuously pulled at the leash, turning his head toward where they had just left, emitting soft howls, full of concern. And after an urgent call from the night staff reporting that Nova's condition was deteriorating, Lisa decided to try something unprecedented. Sarah was asked to bring Thor back and place the dog's temporary kennel right next to Nova's enclosure overnight, with a staff member monitoring and recording the entire process through infrared camera systems. When Thor was placed near Nova's enclosure, something miraculous happened. The young bobcat immediately stopped crying. Nova slowly moved toward Thor, lying down as close to the enclosure bars as possible. Thor also pressed close from the outside, his nose almost touching Nova's through the gaps between the bars. Within 5 minutes, Nova had fallen into deep sleep for the first time since arriving at the sanctuary after days of pain and fear. "We need to understand what's happening here," Lisa said when reviewing the recorded biological data. Nova's cortisol levels dropped 70% within minutes of Thor being nearby. This can't be coincidence or random chance. Specialized monitoring equipment was installed to track Nova's heart rate, breathing, and even simple brain activity during sleep with and without Thor. The results were undeniable. Nova only achieved REM sleep, the deep sleep phase necessary for physical and mental recovery when Thor was nearby. Without Thor, Nova fell into light sleep, constantly jerking awake or remained completely alert all night. The experiment expanded. They tried recordings of Thor's sounds, placing toys with Thor's scent, even trying with another husky of similar appearance. Nothing worked like Thor's actual presence. There was something very special in the connection between these two creatures that couldn't be explained simply through science. While scientists tried to understand this phenomenon, Nova and Thor developed a deeper relationship. Nova began mimicking Thor's way of moving. Instead of trying to stand on her weak hind legs, the Bobcat learned to use her strong front legs to pull her body forward while dragging her back portion along the ground. Not the natural movement of bobcats, but remarkably effective. Nova went a little further, exploring more space in the specialist's safe area. There were amazing moments when Nova began mimicking even Thor's responses to basic commands, not because she had been trained, but simply from observation. When Thor sat down at Sarah's command, Nova also tried to perform a similar motion. When Thor tilted his head at a certain whistle, Nova did too, though not perfectly. This was a form of mimicry unexpected in a wild feline species. However, not everything went smoothly. Challenges arose when managers worried about anthropomorphizing a wild bobcat. Sanctuary Director Richard Matthews was concerned about the precedent this might set if all injured wildlife were bonded with domestic animals. Natural balance and reintegration goals could be affected. Test separating Nova and Thor for 24 hours was conducted as an assessment of dependency levels. However, the test had to stop after 12 hours when Nova fell into an extreme panic state. The young bobcat completely refused food, emitted continuous distress calls, and began scratching at the enclosure walls until her claws bled. Thor, separated at a distance, wasn't doing better. The dog refused to leave Sarah's cabin door, howling continuously as if calling for his friend. Monitoring equipment showed Nova's heart rate and blood pressure spiking to dangerous levels, increasing the risk of post-surgical complications. After 12 hours, Lisa was forced to stop the test, putting Nova's safety above research objectives. Finally, after much evaluation and discussion, Nova was treated as an exceptional case. Sarah received special permission to adopt Nova at her home near the forest edge, where she had prepared a semi-wild space with all the necessary safety conditions for Nova, Thor, and the surrounding community. 5 years had passed since Nova moved to live with Sarah and Thor. The bobcat had grown to full maturity. Her spinal injury never fully healed as predicted, but her body had adapted remarkably. Nova had developed into a beautiful adult bobcat, with a healthy glossy spotted coat and bright amber eyes, no longer showing the panic of those early days. Nova's mobility had improved far beyond all predictions. She had developed a unique way of moving, half walking, half crawling, using the extraordinary strength of her front legs and abdominal muscles to move with surprising speed and agility. Though unable to run fast or jump high like fully healthy bobcats, Nova could explore her entire territory, climb onto low rocks, and even climb sturdy tree branches near the ground, an important skill for bobcats. Morning, Nova would lie on the large, flat rock on the eastern side of the property where she could catch the first rays of the day. Thor would always join her, sometimes resting his head on Nova's shoulder, and both would watch the sunrise in an understanding silence. These moments needed no words, no explanation, just peaceful presence. Together. Over time, something miraculous happened. The relationship became balanced. Nova was no longer completely dependent on Thor for security. Now, sometimes Thor was the one seeking Nova during thunderstorms. When thunder frightened the aging dog, Thor would leave his warm bed in Sarah's house, go down to where Nova usually slept, and Nova would lie still, allowing Thor to press close to her spotted fur. The bobcat had transformed from one being healed to one who heals. By the fourth winter, Thor began slowing down. Age was showing clearly on the husky's body. Nova seemed to understand this change and began adjusting her pace, waiting for Thor, never going too far from her aging friend. On an unusually hot autumn afternoon, when yellow leaves fell gently around the property, Nova did something unprecedented, using her nose to gently push Thor toward the shade beneath a large oak tree. Thor was breathing heavily in the sunlight, and Nova continuously pushed, guiding her old friend to a cooler spot. Nova wasn't just being cared for anymore. She had become the caretaker. The fifth winter came early and was more severe. Thor, now 13 years old, went through difficult days. Nova rarely left Thor during this time. The bobcat often lay close beside Thor, sharing warmth from her strong body. On the longest winter night that year, Thor lay on his warm bed in the house, breathing laboriously. Nova, who typically avoided coming indoors, pushed the door open herself and entered, something she had never done before. The bobcat gently lay down beside Thor, placing her head on her old friend's shoulder. Throughout that night, Nova didn't sleep, eyes wide open, watching Thor as if trying to transfer strength to her weakening friend. When dawn came, Thor had passed away in peaceful sleep, with Nova still beside him, still alert, still guarding. The days that followed, Nova lay motionless in the corner of the room where Thor's bed used to be. But on the third day, Sarah saw Nova lying on the eastern rock where the two friends used to greet the sunrise together. The bobcat lay there, head held high, eyes looking toward the rising sun. Nova was beginning again in her own way. The following spring, Sarah found an injured wolf cub front leg caught in a poacher's trap. A painfully familiar situation. When Sarah placed the small wolf on the new bed, Nova slowly approached. The bobcat gently sniffed the trembling wolf cub, then lay down beside him, her body forming a protective arc around the small creature. That night, for the first time since Thor passed away, Nova slept a deep and peaceful sleep beside another being. The circle had closed and begun anew. What Thor had done for Nova years ago, Nova now did for another life. In need of help, the lesson of healing was passed on not through words, but through footsteps in the cycle of life. Under the moonlight, a grown bobcat with weak hind legs and a wolf cub with a bandaged front paw together discovered what Nova and Thor had found, that the path to healing doesn't come from perfection, but from finding someone who understands your pain and is willing to walk in step with you, no matter